Man, I don't know, but it seems like FanDuel is just going to let you steal money with SMU's over-under win total heading into 2026.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's Locked On SMU on a Wednesday. Appreciate you making us your first listen of the day and for making Locked On Podcast the #1 sports podcast network that is out there. My name's Grayson Singleton. Glad you're joining me. And coming up on the show today is SMU's tight end starting to rise in the draft process. SMU just came out of Pro Day, so we'll talk about the performances of RJ Maryland and Matthew Hibner. Plus, is there a lesson still to be learned from SMU's letdown at Wake Forest last year? We'll talk about that on the heels of what we're about to talk about right now. And that is the fact that FanDuel, our friends and partners at the company, has SMU's over-under win total set at 8.5. Is that stealing money for SMU? Now, you can look at this two ways, and there is only one point to the contrary, and we're going to keep catastrophic injury out of this conversation, because you can't project that. So everything in this conversation is barring catastrophic injury. Right. But there's two ways to look at this. There's the first way, which is the football and the schedule. And then there's the second way, which is, but it's SMU. So let's look at it the first way. Is this stealing money? Yes, this is stealing money. If SMU's over-under win total is 8.5. There will be no better quarterback that SMU plays this season. Maybe, and I mean maybe, CJ Carr at Notre Dame, that is better than Kevin Jennings. CJ Carr is the only quarterback on the schedule that has the chance to be better than Kevin Jennings. And some might say he already is. I'm not there yet with CJ Carr. I understand he had a pretty good season last year. He had one of the top QBRs in the country last year for Notre Dame. But I'm not there yet with CJ Carr. But outside of him, there is no discussion. No other team on SMU's schedule has a quarterback that is as good or better than SMU's. Maybe one. And I just remember that they play Cal. Because JKS is pretty solid. I'll give JKS his flowers. Sangapolatelli. I'll give him his flowers. But even then, that's only two. So even if, and a lot of times this does, especially in college, dictate win and loss, especially in college, if you only have two guys that are as good or better at the quarterback position than your dude, it's going to be hard to win less than 8.5 games for SMU. But that's number one. They're going to have a distinct quarterback advantage over everybody that they're going to play except two. Those are the only ones where it will be a competition as to who is the better quarterback. Which leads me to point number two. And it's a point that we've made almost every day this week, but it's the schedule. You're telling me that's an 8.5 win schedule? Now, I know FanDuel can't put this at 9.5. FanDuel cannot put this line at 9.5 because that seems like it's a little bit easy to play the under there, especially if SMU wins 9 games. But this does not look like an 8-win schedule to me. If what we know about SMU can be true, really good right side of the offensive line, I think an upgraded running back. We'll see how the receivers end up. But you reloaded at tight end, and then you've got a couple playmakers defensively. Based on that and this schedule, it just doesn't seem like an 8-win schedule to me. It just doesn't. This seems like minimum a 9-win schedule, especially with the quarterback advantages going back to point one that you would have had. So you've got a schedule that is going to be lenient toward you winning more than 8.5 games. You've got a quarterback advantage that will do the same. And also, you've got a historical point. Because the last time SMU had a really weak schedule, which this is what this one is, except you added Notre Dame to it, which awesome. But the last time that SMU had a really weak schedule, they won. They got to the college football playoff. So historical precedent should tell you that the Mustangs win games they're supposed to win. Now, last year was a little bit of a hiccup, especially the Wake Forest game, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. But by and large, especially once they got into conference play, again, barring the Wake Forest game from last year, this Mustang team generally, not every time, because I know some of you guys are going to throw the TCU game, maybe even the Baylor game, I understand that, but not every time, but generally, they win the games they're supposed to win and then rise to the occasion against teams that you may not have thought they were going to defeat, i.e. Miami last year. So I get three things here. I get a quarterback advantage, I get a schedule that is conducive to winning more than 8.5 games, and I get a run with a coach that generally wins games they're supposed to win. Again, not every time, but generally. And if I'm to believe that that coach is continuing to get better, then I think they will continue to win more and more of those games, maybe even all of the ones that they should win. Now, there is one counterpoint to why the 8.5 line is stealing money. And the only counterpoint is, well, there are pitfalls with this SMU team. There's two things I've noticed. One is that they are not immune to playing down to competition and having a stinker. The Wake Forest game. A lot of you have chimed in, going back to the group of 5 days on previous podcasts, that SMU has lost one that you really didn't think they should have lost. So that still does exist. It's kind of a double-edged sword here with they generally win a lot of the games that they should win, but then also there's the one that you didn't think they were going to lose and they found a way to. But that would be, in my estimation, looking at the schedule and looking at the teams that are how they're projected to perform this year, that would be my one holdup with this not being stealing money, is that sometimes, and it will come in the wildest of spots, this team will find a way to lay an egg. And it's not just lose to a team that you shouldn't lose to. It's lose to them and play like crap. Like the Wake Forest game. I mean, the offense was the most horrible thing I've ever laid eyes on. So what you're looking at here, I think, is three reasons why this is stealing money and one reason why we might want to pump the brakes. But even if there's a pitfall here, I don't see, looking at the schedule and barring catastrophic injury, especially with, by the way, you get that Cal team that really played you well and ultimately beat you in the season finale. You get that team at home this year. And I know you got to go to Louisville, you got to go to Florida State. But I look at the way that your quarterback matches up, that your schedule matches up, and how you've got a coach who has won and is eager to win some more. I think they get it done. I think 8.5 is stealing money with an over-under win total here with our friends at FanDuel. Hey, and if you want to jump on it right now, go do it with our friends at FanDuel. All right, coming up next here on Locked On SMU, these tight ends, they keep rising, and their pre-draft performances have continued to look really good. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On SMU.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. All four number one seeds, UConn, UCLA, Texas, and South Carolina, have completely dominated the opening rounds of the NCAA tournament. UConn rolled with a 98-45 victory over Syracuse behind AZ Fudd, who had a 34-point explosion, while South Carolina has been led by Joyce Edwards coming off a 23-point game. UCLA leaned on Lauren Betts with a 35-point performance in an 87-68 win over Oklahoma State. And Texas advanced comfortably with a 40-point show from Madison Booker. And now we're headed to the Sweet 16. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
The tournament is here, one of the best times of the year. Brackets, buzzer beaters, upsets. It's nonstop action from tip to the final cut down. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a way to stay in the action all tournament long. Here's the best part. You can get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day. That's right. $300 in bonus bets every day for 10 days. That means 10 chances to stay involved throughout the entire tournament, even if something doesn't really go your way, which, hands up, the bracket's busted. Me too. And you can mix it up however you want. Game picks, futures, or you know what I like, those same game parlays for even bigger potential payouts. It's perfect for the tournament because every day there's something new. Different matchups, new storylines, and more ways to get involved as the bracket unfolds. So visit FanDuel.com to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com to get in on the action. Back here on Locked On SMU, appreciate you guys making us your first listen of the day. Hey, remember to get your first month free with the Everydayer Club when you use code MARCH. You'll unlock ad-free episodes and entry into our private listener group chat where I'm hanging out all day. Click the link in the show notes to learn more or go to lockedonsmu.supercast.com to claim your free month. All right, so SMU's Pro Day was the other day, and RJ Maryland and Matthew Hibner continued to steal the show. Now, there is more from Pro Day that could be broached on another day. Jordan Hudson looked pretty good, and he's got dinner with the Dallas Cowboys. How fun would that be if he stayed in Dallas, follow Scott Simons over to Big D and play for the Cowboys. But it's the tight ends for me in this pre-draft process that continue to catch my eye. And I already thought that they were going to be intriguing draft prospects just coming out of last year because we knew what RJ could do pre-injury and when healthy. And Hibner really stole the show once Maryland went down and then was working his way back from the injury in the 2025 season and really jumped onto NFL draft radars. But at SMU's Pro Day, RJ Maryland posted a 4.37 pro shuttle, which is excellent. And then Matthew Hibner was just a couple hundredths of a second behind at 4.39. Hibner he's got dinner with the Saints, and he secured a new one with the Dallas Cowboys as well. And I think now, because we already thought RJ was going to be drafted, Hibner is a different one. But I'm in the camp that they're both going to be drafted. I really think SMU is going to get 2 tight ends drafted because they continue to test well. If not, they will be priority free agents. They will be no worse than priority undrafted free agents because they fit the NFL game so perfectly well. They really do because they are bigger players. They're both upwards of 240. They're lean and they can move. They have good body control. They have great agility. And those pro shuttle drills show that those dudes can move for guys that are that big, extremely flexible, and they are very comfortable lining up wherever. They can line up as an inline tight end with their hand in the dirt, or they can split out into the slot and play as a slot Y. And it is so crucial for tight ends in this day and age of the NFL to be able to do all of it. Because the group that was started by guys like, Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates, the guys that were playing when I was growing up, right? And then it continued on, and I think really took off with the generation of Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce and, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle. Mark Andrews, the great tight ends of the present day, is that tight ends have gotten so much more versatile, but they've been asked to get so much more versatile without suffering in the run blocking game. And those dudes can block. RJ Maryland and Matthew Hibner can block. So they're not as big and as dynamic as some of the top end tight ends. Like I'm not forecasting that one of them is going to have the career that a guy like Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon is expected to have. But I think these dudes can be productive tight ends in the NFL. I really do, because they just so perfectly fit the mold. And credit to Casey Woods, the offensive coordinator, and Rhett Lashley, the offensive play caller and head coach, for getting these guys well-versed and comfortable with playing tight end, not just as traditionally played, but as played in the present day as well. Because we know that they can play as slot guys. They can play a little bit on the outside too. We know they can do it, not because they told us, but because they showed us. And because they both thrived in being matchup nightmares when it comes to figuring out how to guard them, especially when they play from the slot. So I do think there is an NFL future here for both of these kids, for both RJ and Matthew Hibner. And I believe also, you go back to RJ Maryland's tape pre-injury and go all the way back to 2023 as well. RJ's that dude. RJ is that dude. We know that. Works his way back from blowing his knee out, gives SMU some pretty good contributions. But that whole time, after RJ had established himself, all of a sudden, wait, who is this Matthew Hibner cat that also can do work from the tight end position? So the Mustangs did a really, really good job here. And in a bonus episode later today, we're going to ask the question, is SMU becoming tight end U? Now, obviously that will be tongue in cheek. That will be tongue in cheek because it's way too premature to seriously entertain something like that. But SMU is doing something very interesting with the tight end position that I find very, very good. But starting with these dudes, and it's a credit to SMU with the way they're using these guys, because a lot of people don't get creative enough with tight ends that possess the skill sets of Matthew Hibner and RJ Maryland. But SMU did. They didn't sacrifice their blocking in the run game. They didn't sacrifice their run game either. But they got versatile, and they figured out how to use these dudes to their best ability. And I will say, even though sometimes there were guys that you thought of that maybe you could have gotten a little bit more from them, I'm pretty sure there's a player that comes to mind for each and every one of you watching this show. But you can't say that about RJ Maryland and Matthew Hibner. I think SMU got the most out of those dudes and allowed those dudes to showcase all of themselves and all of their skill set and versatility. And now them following it up with good performances at the Combine and good performances at SMU's Pro Day, you got to be happy for those dudes because they're going to get drafted. I really think they're going to get drafted. Now, will they get drafted any higher than the 5th round? Wouldn't put my money on that one. But they'll be drafted and they'll have a home. That's what I think is going to happen. And if not, they'll be a priority UDFA. Because teams are always going to look for second and third tight ends that can really make a difference. You know, a guy like Kyle Shanahan could use guys like that. Andy Reid in Kansas City can use guys like that. Philadelphia might be in the market for tight ends here real soon. Just thinking about all the recent news that's gone on with tight ends, you know? So I do think there's going to be a market for those guys. There's going to be a market for those guys' versatility and services. And it'll be fun to see where they end up. All right, one more segment to go. Locked On SMU will continue. Will Rhett Lashley and the team learn from Wake Forest? And this will go back to the conversation of the 8.5 win total. I'll tell you more about that to close up the show next. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood Prediction Markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood Prediction Markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge, and now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and clear swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, and location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. It's less stress, less time, with more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. One more segment here to go. Locked on SMU. I'm Grayson Singleton on this Wednesday. Okay, so going back to the conversation with the 8.5 win total on FanDuel. One of the things I mentioned as a counter argument to that being stealing money is that SMU has been prone to the oopsie. The one game where you lay a donut when you weren't supposed to. And when it comes to Rhett, Lashley and this team, obviously last year that game was Wake Forest. I did not think there was any chance in hell SMU lost that game, and sure enough, they came out looking as bad as I could have imagined them being offensively. Defense kept them in it. Defense gave them a chance to win it. Defense had them winning the game until the offense coughed it up. So anyway, is there something that we can learn from that game against Wake Forest? And I think the answer is yes, and I think it's going to be fixed. Because if you look at 2025 and you look at how that schedule shook out, we talked about this at the time, but the way the schedule shook out kind of gave way to a pitfall here. Because in between, so Wake Forest was in between a 2-game set where you went to Clemson, then we're on the second week on the Atlantic coast, and then your next game up ahead was Miami. You see where I'm going here. There were two things that were working against SMU here. Number one was you had to figure out how to get over that win that you got at Death Valley over Clemson. Regardless of how bad Clemson was last year, going to Clemson and winning a game is still very, very difficult. So you had to get over that. And then also, it was your second weekend in a row over in the Carolinas. Something else to keep in mind. And then you had to make sure you didn't look up ahead to the Miami game, which they ultimately ended up winning. If you look at SMU's schedule this year, there's only one game, I think, that really falls into the conversation of a trap game. And coincidentally, it's a regular season finale in the state of California. And it's the November 28th game at Stanford. That's the one. When you look at it from that perspective, they're going to be coming off of a game a week earlier in South Bend. So second weekend on the road in a wild part of the country. That's a wild travel schedule. Going to South Bend, Indiana, then coming back, then going to Palo Alto, California. It's a wild schedule in terms of that. But also, if you win that game in Notre Dame, let's just say for sake of argument that SMU wins that game against Notre Dame, you got to come down from that high real fast to make sure you don't overlook the Stanford Cardinal. So there's that point. But here's why I think I would be okay with it, is because I think Rhett finally got how to approach games like that. Because a lot of times we can say from a fan standpoint, from a media standpoint, like I'm in, is that you got to come down fast, got to refocus, got to regroup. It's much harder than it looks. I mean, you could have played sports in high school and know this. You get done beating your rival, you're trying to relish in something like that. Maybe it was an upset over the rival, right? Or you get any other kind of big win. Got a game 48 hours later. We got to make sure we group back in. And it's easier to get away with in high school because there's different variations in terms of talent that you might see from one night to the other. But when it comes to Power 4 football, that doesn't mean a whole lot. It's grown men playing against grown men. And if you don't bring your A game one game, yeah, that team could be 3-9, but oops, they're going to get you. So I do think Rhett finally has felt that. I think Rhett feels that after that Wake Forest game. That's a game they should not have lost. And will know better the next time it pops up how to make sure that they manage the travel better, which also goes hand in hand with managing the recovery, and then managing getting your guys off of one game to honing in on the game plan and getting ready for the next opponent. Because there will ultimately be times where you can look back on the season and say, damn, we did that. That will exist. That time will come. But for the time being, you've got to make sure that you are going to take care of business in the next game. So it's going to be a learn from experience type thing. But I think they've had the experience. So I'm okay saying, I think they got this. But to go back to the 8.5 wins that we started up with at the beginning of the show, that line feels like stealing money until you bake in a pretty worrisome SMU tendency. So if that tendency is fixed, okay, then we're chilling. We're chilling with SMU. But if not, okay, now we got something to work. Now we got something we really gotta figure out here. But in terms of how it's going to get potentially SMU over that 8.5 win threshold and potentially put them in position to get back to the college football playoff, that is the one thing I'm concerned about. That would be it. But if that's fixed, because they went through it last year and saw the embarrassment of that, and I'm pretty sure they were embarrassed by the way they played, then you're going to want to not have a repeat of that this year. And Rhett's still on that squad, leading the way. Kevin Jennings is still the quarterback. He felt that. And as long as they have holdovers from that, I think their preparation in the one game that I think could really mirror that. There's only one on this schedule that I think could really mirror that, because they don't have back-to-back road games on the schedule except for the final 2 weeks of the season. So if that's the one time that's going to mirror it, I feel pretty confident that they'll be able to get it done. And we'll be looking at a different team with a different vibe going into the month of December, if everything else holds as it could potentially hold. All right, that'll do it for Locked On SMU here on this Wednesday. Appreciate you all making me your first listen of the day. I'm Grayson Singleton. Hey, make sure that you come back later on in the day. We'll talk about some more pro day reaction, and is SMU potentially becoming tight end you? Hey, for your second listen of the day, make sure you check out the 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball as your second listen of the day. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Take it.